Hello, listeners. Welcome to an emergency episode of the Jacob Shapiro podcast. We are going to have a couple episodes today. The first is the short mini episode with Hamidreza Azizi. He has been on the podcast before. He is a leading researcher and expert on Iran and Iranian security. Thank you to him for making the time. This is a short 30-minute episode. We'll have Kamran on in a bit. Cousin Marco and I are doing an episode over on Geopolitical Cousins. I may have more after that. I'm going after some Israeli security analysts too. And it sounds like this is not going to be a 24-hour thing. It sounds like this is going to be a many weeks long thing, depending on how things escalate from here. So I'll do my best to keep you abreast and to bring you some perspectives. Take care of the people that you love. Cheers, and see you out there. All right, well, let's just start with the basics. So we're recording Friday morning here in the United States. It's 9:32 Central Time. We're not gonna sit on this content, listeners. We'll push stuff out as we go, but even then, probably some things will be overtaken by events. But we've got our first expert on this morning. Hamidreza, good to see you. Thank you for making the time. Let's start at the very simplest level. Like, what are your first reactions to what's happened over the last 24 hours? I can tell you, I personally was pretty surprised. I put a note on our internal research platform yesterday that this seems to be escalating quickly, but I wasn't thinking quite that quickly. So your first reactions.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join you again, maybe not in a very good or pleasant time. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it was also quite shocking to me. We could already see signs of a perfect storm gathering, but again, and still, reports about the upcoming nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States in Oman, scheduled for Sunday, and things like that. That could be seen as some assurances that at least in a few days time window there won't be any major escalation. But here we are, and I think it was also quite shocking to the Iranian government as well. I can imagine, and one would expect them to be quite prepared, especially after all that happens to their allies in the so-called axis of resistance over the past year, and also the tit-for-tat attacks, the latest round of Israeli attacks on Iranian proper in October. So given all that, they must have been prepared, but then we can see the scope of damage, both in terms of the the number of high-ranking military commanders killed in the Israeli strikes, and also the scope of the geographical scope, actually, of the Israeli reach to military sites, and this raises significant questions about the proper planning or kind of proper understanding, actually, of what might come and how they should be prepared for that.
It seems, at least from the initial damage, like you said, that maybe Iran was prepared, but it seems like Israel was really able to neutralize air defense. I mean, it seems like Israel, I won't say has control over Iranian skies, but Israel's talking about a 2-week-long operation. I was actually chatting with some of my fellow researchers after the first reports of attacks. We were like, this is kind of timid. And then Netanyahu comes out, and then it's a second wave, and then it's a third wave, and then you're starting to get reports about some of the damage. How can Iran respond? I think that's the big question here. I saw some initial reports that maybe there were some drones that were fired towards Israel or sent towards Israel, and Israel's already shot them down. Do you think that sort of Iran just sort of has to take the punch, or is there going to be some kind of meaningful response that they can engage in right now? Because right now it seems like Israel has control over the situation.
Yeah, it seems very much so. And the thing is that air defense was already, and for a long time, the weakest part in the overall map of Iranian kind of military infrastructure and military doctrine. That was why actually they started working on this concept of forward defense in the first place, to basically compensate for the lack of effective air defense. And on that, we should also note that one element is the kind of technology deficit, especially comparably speaking, when it comes to what Israel has, for example, or other Iranian adversaries have in the region. And the other one is, of course, about the vast geography of Iran, so it's quite difficult to have proper air defense for all that. So anyway, that was why they worked with non-state actors to extend the geography of their defense and deterrence far beyond the Iranian borders. So what happened over the past few months? I mean, technically, over the course of the war in Gaza and beyond, was that that kind of forward defense, the strategic depth of Iran, as they call it, started to shrink, and to the extent that it was only Iraq and Yemen remaining, and even on that, there were serious doubts about the extent to which they could engage. So that's why we see what we see, because already in October, end of October, the Israeli strikes, they successfully neutralized parts of some key parts of the Iranian air defense, which were the Russian-made S-300s and also some others. So there was already this gap, and now it seems that in the past month, despite a lot of efforts that we could see, they were not really able to close that gap. And together with, as I said, the lack of proper allied support in the region in terms of non-state allies and proxies, they are in this kind of very difficult situation. So that's about the defense part. On the offense, we can also, there is this kind of direct connection between these two, because as far as I could tell, there were at least three phases in this, in what seems to be actually the first round. Only the first round of Israeli attacks, as they say, is going to continue. So there were three phases. The first phase was they happened more or less simultaneously, but we can say maybe three main pillars. So one was neutralizing Iranian military commanders together with some nuclear scientists. So in a sense, trying to paralyze strategic decision making on the top. So this is quite reminiscent of what happened in Lebanon, for example, with Hezbollah, with top Hezbollah commando structure. Then the second pillar, or the second phase, was to target the military, basically some of the missile bases, and also some underground nuclear facilities, in this case specifically Natanz in central Iran. So the attacks on these have been ongoing. Last time I checked, kind of an hour ago or so, it was still ongoing. So it seems that, to me, it seems like one of the reasons that Iran has not responded yet, because one can imagine that they must have already had some plans ready for retaliation, right? So this kind of lack of, or the loss of, better to say, top military command in charge of decision making for retaliation, and the damages that might have caused, we still don't know the details, to the missile bases, might have caused this. And the third and final, so far, the third pillar or third phase of this, which is again still seems to be ongoing, is to target what is left of Iran's air defense, especially concentrating on western areas of Iran. We saw frequent attacks on Tabriz, for example, on Noje air base in Hamadan, all located in western Iran, northwest and west. So on that, it seems that there is an attempt to kind of clear the way for future strikes, probably deeper inside the country, probably with kind of more direct engagement of Israeli airplanes, kind of fighter jets, within the Iranian airspace or things like that. So this all has complicated the Iranian response, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. You mentioned the proxies. So at least in Israeli media, I don't know how much credence to give this, is reporting that Hezbollah is saying they're not going to strike Israel. which is, I mean, shocking if that's true. Who knows if it's true or if the Israeli media is trying to shape the media ecosystem. You mentioned the Houthis. They successfully stood up to some United States airstrikes, a couple weeks, months ago, to the surprise of President Donald Trump, who said he's had some kind of deal with the Houthis to not attack American interests. Obviously, the Assad regime is gone, and probably the elimination of Syrian air defense, as we talked about on this podcast a couple weeks ago, has something to do with the ease with which Israel has done some of these things. Are there any proxies left? Are there any left standing? Do the Houthis have a renewed campaign in them for the Persian Gulf? And I guess that also gets into the question of where do you think the United States' role in this? Because at least last night when I went to sleep, Marco Rubio was putting out statements saying the U.S. has nothing to do with this. This is Israel alone. We urge all sides to calm down. And you wake up this morning and you've got Trump ranting on Truth Social that this is a beautiful attack. And I gave them a chance. They can still come to the table. And you've got, sources in both Axios, the Wall Street Journal saying, yes, not only did the United States know, the United States intentionally made it seem like nothing was happening in order to lull the Iranians into a false sense of security. So do you think that the United States becomes involved in the Iranian reaction? Is Iran so weakened or chastened that it's not going to go after U.S. assets? Help us think about the proxies and the U.S. here, because this obviously goes to more than just Israel and Iran.
I think this question actually lies in the heart of the Iranian calculations right now, because whether or not to include the United States in a potential response might make the whole situation quite different in terms of the consequences. Let's start with this last point you made about kind of whether or not the United States was involved. I would say, in terms of the thinking and perception on the Iranian side, no matter what Trump says, what Rubio says, what are the contradictions, it is perceived and presented as a deception strategy deliberately kind of designed and conducted by the United States and Israel in order to make sure that Iran would be more or less unprepared for an Israeli attack. And there are actually some cases that the Iranian expert community, for example, already before all this happened, would refer to warning about this potential scenario. For example, they would mention Amos Hochstein, the former U.S. representative for the Middle East, going to Lebanon, negotiating a ceasefire deal, and the other day, some top Hezbollah leadership, being assassinated by Israel. So they were already warning about that, and now they say, look, this is exactly what we were warning about, and that now this is happening. On the Iranian side, this is important in terms of their calculation of where we are. We are in a situation that, again, in their perception, we are in a situation that there is a coordinated plan by the United States and Israel against us, in which, of course, the United States still has a lot to offer, which it has not, brought on the table yet in terms of active participation. So the question would be, first, is it logical at this stage to escalate against the United States and invite an even stronger response by the United States and Israel? And the second question, which would kind of answer the first one as well, is that what would happen if we don't escalate? Is it not going to happen anyway? Is it not that, at some point the United States will come in after, the air defense, kind of Iranian airspace is cleared, and so on, that they would come in using their bunker busters to destroy what is left of Iranian nuclear facilities. So I think this is, again, one of the complexities that has, if not paralyzed, actually delayed the decision making on the Iranian side. So here we can say we can kind of a bit more clearly, or with more clarity, speak about the potential options that Iran may have. So first of all, as I said, we still don't know how much damage has been inflicted to the Iranian missile silos and kind of missile stockpile. Even if we consider that the damage is not high, then it would be a matter of whether Iran can sustain a campaign of weeks of, for example, continuous massive missile strikes against the United States, how big the stockpile is, and here comes the US factor, because as far as I know, at least before the October 7, and I don't still see any sign of an actual revision of that military strategy. So the traditional thinking in the Iranian military circles has been that whatever happens, whether it is a war initiated by Israel or the United States, we will respond to both. And that response would involve the US bases in Iraq, but also around the Persian Gulf, in Kuwait, in Qatar, in Bahrain. So now the question, apart from how the US will respond, is that first, how is the situation, how this is going to be in terms of implications for Iranian allies in those countries, given all the domestic resistance against this quote-unquote resistance supported by Iran, and here comes, I would say there could be at least some level of credibility in the reports that that Hezbollah doesn't want to engage, because the costs for Hezbollah domestically would be so huge in a situation that it is quite weakened, and the same goes for the Iraqis, And if they want to escalate Iran itself, if they want to escalate against the U.S. bases around the Gulf, for example, then the question would be: how would those countries react? So Iran tried hard to have their support. And it worked a lot on this rapprochement with Saudi Arabia, with other countries. So it would evaporate overnight if Iran decides to do that. And finally, on the Houthis, I think they are already at full capacity in terms of what they can do. And it is not going to have a strategic impact on Israel. And on top of all this, we shouldn't forget the elephant in the room. Israel is a nuclear armed state. So this is what matters more than many people may think, right? So if Iran responds in a way that there is a kind of significant human casualties or so on, is it not going to be the case? Is it not a plausible scenario after all Israel has done in the region, trying to assert the assumption that we have no red lines? Cannot this be the case that they may even resort to some sort of a nuclear escalation against Iran? So it's much more complex than just kind of material capabilities that Iran might have.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't sound, based on what you're saying, that Iran has a whole lot of cards. Maybe they have something up their sleeve once they get together, but it seems like they're in a pretty difficult position. I know you've got a lot going on, so I'll get you out of here on this last question. To me, at least analytically, the biggest, there's so many questions about this, and so much of what we know is probably going to change over time. Like these initial reports are really, it's hard to parse through. So I'm cognizant of not wanting to get too far down with the information that we do have. But at least analytically, it's unclear to me, at least, whether this is an attack against Iran's nuclear capability, including the human capital around it. You sort of talked about some of the scientists that were assassinated, folks that were associated with the negotiation process on the nuclear deal, generals, things like that. But then also, there's also a take forming out there, which is, well, no, this is actually maybe an attempt at regime change. And if you listen to Netanyahu's 7-minute speech last night, he talked about how this is, we have no problem with the Iranian people. We want the Iranian people to rise up against tyranny and this government that we don't like. And, assertions that, well, if they can get, the head of the IRGC, and if they can get all of these special negotiators, is Khamenei next on the assassination list? Is there a second wave where they start going after the president or the supreme leader himself? Does that destabilize the situation? Is it already destabilized because younger cadres in the IRGC or the military are seeing Iranian weakness and wanting to respond and are less conservative than maybe some of their former leaders were? And just with what we know so far, and I know it's imperfect, how do you see that? Do you think that's what Israel's pushing for? Do you think they have a chance? Are you concerned about the fate of the supreme leader and what happens to Iran if Israel's able to pull some of these things off? These are questions I couldn't have imagined asking 24 hours ago, but here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way that Israel conducted apart from the actual damage and how it is already impacted, it has already impacted Iran's military and potentially also nuclear infrastructure. There's a clear strategic messaging here. For example, Amir Ali Hajizadeh, the commander of the IRGC aerospace force, who was also killed. He is said to have been in a meeting with like 20 other commanders of the same force in a allegedly safe place. So the message of targeting all these individuals without difficulty is that the only reason that Khamenei is still alive is that we didn't want to kill him. So that is the sort of signal that you can get from between the lines, actually. So yeah, the method. I mean, the signal that we can get from kind of this between the lines signaling is that we can reach wherever we want in Iran, and this is already huge in terms of how it is impacting the mindset of the regime loyalists actually in Iran, who were, as I said, already calling for a significant overhaul, a kind of fundamental rethinking of Iranian military strategy. Those were the same people who were calling for an immediate withdrawal from the NPT and building a nuclear weapon. And by the way, this goes back to the previous point that we discussed in terms of Iran's options. So this might still be on the table, and even more serious than before. Leaving NPT, start working on kind of weaponizing the nuclear program. It may take a long time, under continued airstrike, but this can be one way of actually. When I think of how Khamenei would kind of manage this, despite all the complexities that I said, all the questions that they need to answer before doing something, ironically, this might be the least costly option at this moment, because it could potentially reduce the risk of an immediate escalation involving the United States, buying some time, at the same time working on what you can consider as the ultimate deterrence against Israel, which is nuclear program. So this is a very serious option, and I think and I can imagine that Khamenei is under pressure now more than before by people around him to authorize this. And of course, we don't know to what extent they have already made progress in actual weaponization. What that means? It's not just about uranium enrichment, it's about delivery systems, it's about all this like nuclear warhead, etc., etc. But then that can be one way of mitigating this whole kind of risk of the situation. But in any case, look, you mentioned Netanyahu, for example, and we've seen a very sophisticated and coordinated psychological campaign at the same time as this military campaign is going on, using social media, using official channels, using Persian-speaking media, to transmit this message to the Iranian public that we are not at war with you. We are at war with a system, with a regime, which is which has been cruel to you as well. So we actually have a common enemy. And believe me, there are people who, what I can get from surfing through social media, from talking to people in Iran, there's a kind of dual emotions. On one hand, I could say many people are not really upset about some IRGC commander, even the top IRGC commander, being assassinated, because they see them complicit in killing young people, protesters, etc. But on the other hand, there's huge concern, there's huge worry. For example, when it comes to potential further attacks on nuclear installations, about the kind of radiation and so on, to what extent Israel is going to move forward, target civilian infrastructure, economic infrastructure, how it's going to impact their lives in the longer term. So I can see, and here my answer to the last part of your question, which is actually the first point you asked about in terms of the actual impact. So I think it is the kind of a gamble, I would say, by Israel, counting on this growing gap between state and society in Iran, and trying to increase pressure on the Islamic Republic from both fronts. But the thing is that, I mean, two challenges to this strategy, at least two challenges. First, it can backfire in the sense that more civilian casualties, especially in the expected, future rounds of attacks, can change the public mood. And believe me, I'm an Iranian. I can tell you that Iranian people are very emotional, and it can change really overnight in terms of how they think, how they see the situation. And it's still difficult to speak of a rally around the flag effect, but it is not. It cannot be totally ruled out. So this is one thing. And second, exactly because the Islamic Republic sees this pressure from both sides, and this has been a scenario they try to avoid for a long time. It may actually push them toward the extreme, because what option is left for you? Externally, one can imagine, okay, this can be solved by Iran going to the table, as President Trump has suggested again, surrendering everything. And this time, I would say it's not just about Iran not enriching uranium, but also, the whole missile program, drone program, etc., regional, in order to stop the attacks, if you can stop it. But then, what kind of image it would project domestically? So by surrendering in one front, what they can see as capitulation on one front, you already lose the second front as well. So this is what they what can call, if they can rethink. I mean, if they can gather what is left of their strategic decision making and decide what they want to do, they may escalate actually on both fronts, in terms of securitization of domestic sphere, and also doubling down on the external side, which would involve going for a nuclear weapon, as I said.
Hamidreza, I know we're not going to have answers here. We're mostly providing questions and frameworks, but thank you for coming on. And I hope that,
it's my pleasure.
Well, I don't know what I hope for, but I know that I hope that you will come back on in a couple more days as some of the dust settles and we try and analyze some of what's happening. But in the meantime, thank you for being generous with your time and your perspective. And we'll see you soon.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Jacob Shapiro podcast. The show is produced and edited by Jacob Smulian, and it's in many ways the Jacob Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, or leave a review. It takes just a couple seconds of your time, but it really helps us. Also share with a friend. If you're interested in learning more about hiring me to speak at your event, or if you want to learn more about the wealth management services that I offer through Bespoke or Cognitive Investments, you can find more information at jacobshapiro.com. You can also write to me directly at jacob@jacobshapiro.com. I'm also on X for now with the handle Jacob Shap. That's Jacob, S-H-A-P, no dats, dashes, or anything else, but I'm not hard to find. See you out there.